The morning sunlight fell gently across my yard, painting the dew-kissed grass in shades of gold. A gentle breeze carried the soft scent of blooming lilacs, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil where I had planted tomatoes just yesterday. Their tiny leaves stretched skywards, oblivious to the chaos about to unfold. Our neighborhood had always maintained a certain quiet charm, its streets lined with old oaks, casting long shadows that danced with the wind. It was a place where time seemed to flow differently, idyllic, yet never dull, unassuming. Until Karen. Karen had moved in 2 springs ago, bringing with her a clipboard, an iron will, and a never-ending list of rules. She was the self-appointed guardian of our homeowners association, a stickler for order, with an eagle eye for any deviation from the norm. In her world, everything was a potential code violation, and the mere sight of my tomatoes had clearly ruffled her feathers. She first appeared at the edge of my yard, a silhouette against the rising sun, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her presence was like the sudden chill of a lingering autumn breeze, unsettling in its persistence. I watched from my front porch, the steaming mug of coffee in my hands a comforting anchor to sanity. For a moment, we remained like that, her eyes scanning my garden with the intensity of a hawk circling prey, me sipping coffee, watching her with the detached amusement one might reserve for a particularly stubborn squirrel. I had long since learned that battles with her brand of righteousness were best fought with patience and a steady heart. Karen vanished as suddenly as she appeared, leaving behind an air thick with unspoken threats. I shrugged it off, retreating to my thoughts of rich, red fruits blossoming under summer skies. But Karen was not one to let things lie. She returned, as I knew she would, with the full weight of her conviction. Ironically, it was the quietude of my afternoon that was shattered by the discordant wail of sirens. My peace, so delicately woven, unraveled as a patrol car rolled to a stop outside my home. The officer stepped out, a bemused expression painted across his face. A routine disturbance, yet with a touch of the absurd even he couldn't ignore. He pointed to the plot where my tomatoes rested, as if asking if this was the source of the supposed anarchy. I nodded, sharing a silent moment of understanding. Karen stood a distance away, righteous indignation etched across her features, the clipboard clutched to her side like a shield. It was a ludicrous spectacle, the kind that turns neighbors into silent spectators peeking through drawn curtains. Yet amidst it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had nothing to hide. No rules had been broken. The officer, with a glance that spoke volumes of his disbelief, addressed Karen. His words lost to me, but their intention clear. She gestured wildly, her voice rising with the desperation of one who sees their meticulous plans unraveling. And then, a singular line from him cut through the noise, crystal clear in its irony. "It's just tomatoes, ma'am." With those words, the tension dissipated, leaving only the quiet rustle of leaves as the breeze resumed its gentle dance. Karen turned on her heel, retreating with the clipped steps of defeat. I watched her go, the scene already fading into the absurd tapestry of neighborhood lore. The officer nodded to me, a silent salute to sanity, before driving away. In the wake of the storm, my tomatoes stood resilient, their leaves swaying as if to applaud this small victory. In my garden, life continued as before, unchanged and unperturbed, and in the quiet that followed, the promise of bright red tomatoes seemed all the sweeter. The afternoon sun dipped below the eaves, casting its long shadows across the yard as I quietly returned to the scene of my supposed crime. The tomatoes had grown plump and vibrant, a defiant splash of red against the earth. They stood there, accused yet unbowed. I could almost hear them whispering tales of rebellion in the breeze. It was as if they understood the absurdity of their situation, villains in the eyes of one determined neighbor. Karen's call to the authorities had been nothing short of theatrical, her voice shrill enough to break glass, carrying over the fences and into the ears of the neighborhood. Yet the real drama began to unfold not with the arrival of the police, who departed with bemused expressions, but with the escalation that followed in the days after. I found a citation pinned to my front door, an offensively bright pink slip fluttering in the wind. It cited a violation of some obscure subsection of the HOA's sprawling document. Unauthorized cultivation of non-decorative vegetation, it read. My garden, once a sanctuary, now a battleground. The irony was rich, almost comedic. Tomatoes, with their quiet dignity, posed no real threat. They did not bark at odd hours or scatter trash across lawns, yet here they stood, enemy number one under Karen's watchful eye. I imagined her tallying infractions, cataloging perceived slights like a librarian of discontent. And so, the rules began to twist and bend, molding to fit her narrative. New ones seemed to sprout overnight, as if born from the very soil she sought to regulate. No vegetation over 2 feet, no plants within 3 feet of the fence, a stranglehold on nature itself. The list appeared designed to suffocate creativity, to prune away any semblance of individuality. Whispers spread like wildfire, fueled by Karen's fervor. I caught snippets over hedges, overheard conversations as I walked the dog, each tale more fantastical than the last, each one painting me as a horticultural rebel. It was amusing, in a detached sort of way, how quickly the mundane transformed into myth. I wandered through my own garden, fingers brushing the leaves like a silent promise. To stand my ground, to let them grow. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue across the street. It was then that I spotted her silhouette in the window, a sentinel in her fortress. Watching, always watching, but I was not alone in this quiet rebellion. A few neighbors offered sympathetic smiles or knowing nods, allies perhaps in this unspoken war. Their gestures were small but reassuring, a subtle acknowledgement that sanity still lingered in pockets of our community. The days trundled on, each one bringing its own minor skirmish. A new citation here, a disapproving glance there, yet with each challenge, my resolve solidified. I would not be cowed by petty rules or whispered rumors. This was my home, these my tomatoes, resilient as the earth, as rooted as the truth. In the heart of the chaos, I found a strange sort of peace, the knowledge that sometimes quiet strength was enough to withstand the storm of absurdity, enough to plant seeds of change in the most unlikely soil. And so, I waited. I tended. I watched, knowing that in the end, even the smallest acts of defiance could blossom into something beautiful. There's a peculiar symmetry to the sound of footsteps echoing in the early morning air, a sort of quiet reminder that life, in all its messy grandeur, continues despite the petty irritations of suburban conflict. Each step I take towards the garden is deliberate. A march, really. An odd juxtaposition to the sprawling calm of dawn. The tomatoes, their vines still glistening with dew, stand as a quiet rebellion against the sterile uniformity the HOA demands. I kneel down, gloved fingers brushing against the still wet leaves, the silent guardians of my resolve. Last night, the memory of Karen's shrill insistence that tomatoes violated some arcane bylaw lingered like a bad aftertaste, her voice rising in pitch and absurdity until even the crickets seemed embarrassed by her fervor. She had the audacity to call 911. The cops, when they arrived, were bemused, an exchange of glances between them conveying what words could not. I watched from my porch, arms crossed, my face a mask of patient serenity as they gently explained that no crime had been committed. The irony that I, not Karen, had become the recipient of their weary sympathy was not lost on me. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Documenting the saga of my tomato patch versus Karen's overzealous adherence to HOA code became an exercise in therapeutic detachment. I traded barbed words for ink and paper, transforming grievances into a ledger of sorts. Photos, timestamps, neatly compiled reports of each absurd encounter. I imagined turning it into a small tome of suburban absurdity, a collection of the banal turned farce. The next gathering of the HOA loomed. I prepared not with grandiose speeches or righteous indignation, but with quiet resolve. It was, after all, a stage built for the unspectacular drama of our daily lives. An opportunity to present my evidence, each piece carefully curated, to illustrate not just the absurdity of Karen's vendetta, but to highlight the harmonious discord of our community. But plans, even the most meticulous, often take unexpected turns. In the interim, a curious phenomenon began to unfold. Neighbors, those I knew and those I didn't, stopped by. Some under the guise of curiosity, others with more transparent motives. A casual conversation about tomato varieties would morph into whispered admissions of Karen's previous exploits. Stories of floral finds and mailbox micromanagement shared with conspiratorial nods. I realized slowly that this wasn't just about me. It was about us, the unwitting ensemble in Karen's one-woman show. A shared acknowledgement of her theatrics, a subtle shift in the undercurrent of our neighborhood's collective patience. Then, the day of the HOA meeting arrived. I stood, my hands steady as I laid my documentation before them. The room was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. I spoke not of tomatoes or bylaws, but of community, of the quiet strength found in resilience and the ironic harmony found in shared exasperation. Karen's eyes, sharp and narrowed, watched from across the table, but I sensed something else now, a twitch at the corner of her mouth, a softening in her gaze. A reluctant recognition, perhaps, that her crusade had faltered against the sheer weight of the ridiculous. The decision was swift, freeing my garden from the threat of petty tyranny. But more than that, it marked a turning point, a small shift in the dynamics of the neighborhood, a reminder that we were more than just residents bound by rules and regulations. We were a community, bound by shared stories, shared laughter, and shared grievances against the tyranny of triviality. I walked back to my garden, the air lighter, each step a celebration of resilience clad in casual indifference. The tomatoes stood triumphant, a testament to quiet victories and the unexpected solidarity of suburbia. The day after the police left, after they'd looked at my tomatoes and shrugged, after they'd politely advised Karen to steer clear of frivolous complaints, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee. It was a ritual born of necessity, the caffeine no longer serving its purpose, but the ritual itself soothing in a way rituals tend to be. My garden stretched beyond the window, a verdant rebellion against conformity. Each tomato plant stood defiant, their small green fruits promising a future harvest. The HOA's mailed warning sat unopened beside me, Karen's latest flimsy weapon. I had no doubt she'd written it herself with her precise looping script that screamed passive aggression. Her vendetta against homegrown tomatoes was almost comical, yet insidious, wrapping itself around the neighborhood like a choking vine. I reached for the envelope, its flap gaping open, revealing the contents within. A formal letter, a threat of fines, a promise that this matter would not be laid to rest. But there was something Karen hadn't anticipated, something hidden beneath the soil of my calm demeanor and passive acceptance. I had been planning. Months ago, as disputes simmered, I had begun to document everything. Every accusation, every violation notice. Each time she lurked at the edge of my yard, peering through the veil of leaves, I jotted it down. A chronicle of pettiness, meticulously maintained. With a deep breath, I stood, leaving the letter where it lay. I walked to the small home office, cluttered with papers and half-read books. The computer hummed to life, screen flickering, casting an eerie glow in the dim room. I pulled up the digital folder, my arsenal against absurdity, and reviewed the contents. Documentation, photos, legal notes, a silent testament to the absurdity of it all. The legal firm I contacted had been understanding, their advice clear. They had seen it all before. The HOA abuses, the petty tyrannies. They'd known exactly what steps to take. Quiet steps, but powerful. A letter was drafted, one with more potency than any Karen had penned. It challenged the HOA's authority, demanded a cease of harassment, reminded them of state regulations and homeowner rights. As I sent the email, a calm settled over me, an understanding that the system could sometimes bend in favor of those who knew how to ask it to. The weight of it lifted from my shoulders, leaving a strange stillness behind. I closed the computer, looking out at the garden once more. The tomatoes were ripening, their skins blushing under the sun's careful scrutiny. A promise of better days. Karen never imagined that her furious insistence could be met with such quiet resistance. Yet, here it was, manifesting in bites and digital signatures. I imagined her reading the response, the swift change of tides tilting her world, her armor of righteous indignation cracking. In the days that followed, the neighborhood seemed to breathe easier. The letters stopped. The threats of fines disappeared into the past like whispered gossip caught in the wind, and the garden flourished, unburdened by the weight of disapproval. I resumed my rituals, the morning coffee, the tending of plants. But now, beneath the surface, there was a deeper satisfaction, a knowledge that peace had been reclaimed not through confrontation, but through quiet resilience. Irony, perhaps, that the same silence Karen had longed for became her undoing. And so the tomatoes grew, a testament to the quiet power of persistence, their branches heavy with the fruit of defiance. The evening air carried a crispness that signaled autumn's approach, as if the world itself were drawing a deep breath, ready to release the tension that had settled over our small suburban pocket. The sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows that stretched across our lawns, whispering promises of change amidst the rustling leaves. My little garden stood defiantly, its tomato plants heavy with fruit, their presence a silent testament to resilience. Karen had been unexpectedly quiet after the last community meeting, the kind of silence that wasn't born from peace but from strategy. Her absence from the usual patrols and lack of thinly veiled threats left a vacuum that felt both unsettling and oddly liberating. It was the eye of the storm, and I knew it too well. The neighborhood buzzed with quiet anticipation. Whispers of Karen's comeuppance flitted from porch to porch like errant autumn leaves. In her quest to root out a perceived insurrection, she had overreached, igniting a firestorm of complaints that landed on the desk of the regional HOA director. The irony was not lost on anyone. The self-appointed guardian of community standards, ensnared by the very bureaucracy she worshipped. I watched from my porch, coffee cup cradled in my hands, the warmth seeping into my skin as if to remind me of the battles fought and won. My eyes drifted over to the space where Karen's car usually sat. Its absence was a glaring omission, like a missing piece in a jigsaw puzzle. Then, a curious thing happened. As if drawn by an invisible force, neighbors began to gather. First Mrs. Jensen, with her ever-present knitting, then the Wilsons, their children trailing like ducklings. Slowly, more joined, an unspoken agreement pulling them together. Faces that had been shadows behind curtains now emerged into the fading light, their expressions a mix of relief and cautious optimism. A hum of conversation filled the air, punctuated by laughter, genuine, unrestrained, a sound long absent in Karen's reign. The solidarity was palpable, like the first breath of spring after a long, oppressive winter. I felt it in the core of my being, a warmth that no season could quell. In that moment, something shifted. An understanding, unspoken but deeply felt, rippled through the crowd. We were no longer mere residents bound by proximity. We were a community, bonded by shared experience and a collective sigh of relief. As the last of the daylight waned, casting a golden glow over our gathering, a voice broke through the murmur. It was sharp, cutting, and unmistakably Karen's. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, an immovable fixture in a landscape yearning for change. Her eyes scanned the group, landing on me with a defiance that spoke louder than words. But something was different. Her power, once a suffocating presence, now seemed diminished, like a shadow at high noon. She opened her mouth to speak, her voice carrying the weight of someone who knew the battle had been lost. "If you think," she began, but the sentence trailed off, swallowed by the collective resolve of the crowd. We were no longer afraid, no longer willing to bend to the whims of a single misguided soul, and in our silence we spoke volumes. As the gathering dispersed, I felt a lightness in my step. The tomatoes in my garden glistened under the streetlights, vibrant and unapologetic, much like the spirit of our community. Karen returned to her porch, a solitary figure against the backdrop of a neighborhood reborn. She was still there, but she was no longer central. Just another leaf on the wind, swept along as we all moved forward.